Hi everyone. Today we're going to be talking about choosing and using different types of resources. So here we're looking at three different types of general sources. We have academic sources, so these are going to be peer-reviewed sources, popular sources, and contextual sources. All of these are credible sources that you can use and find relatively easily. For this course, you will be required to use a certain number of academic sources. All right, so let's go into what I mean by academic versus popular sources. The distinction between the two really considers the authority and reliability of an author, as well as the editing process. So for academic sources, you're going to get authors who are experts with credentials like degrees. These are non-commercial types of sources, so the purpose here is to expand universal knowledge, and the topics are often addressed at length. And they are peer-reviewed. So peer-reviewed means that typically two or more other academics will review, what is being or proposed to be published. Popular sources include those written by journalists and or reporters or others who might be considered non-experts, as well as they are commercial, so their purpose here is to quickly inform and entertain for profit, and they're often quite brief. So here's just a quick list of some examples of academic and popular sources. Under academic, we see some books, right? Again, you're going to want to verify that the person who wrote this book has some kind of knowledge in their area of publication, has some kind of academic background as well. You can look at some academic journals for sure. We have a lot of those that are accessible at OSU. And then you can also find formal reference text. So there's some encyclopedias as well as dictionaries and style guides that are listed under the academic category. For popular, you might think of newspapers, magazines, some books, broadcast scripts, and I would also include blogs here as well. So when do you choose an academic and popular source? Generally in academic writing, the vast majority of your sources should be academic. So for a paper that requires 5 sources, you're going to want to strive to use at least 4 of them that are academic sources. If a popular source cites an academic source, definitely try to find that academic source so you can use it and or review it. So in terms of contextual sources, these are additional sources that can be used to build contextual knowledge in a research paper. So these might look like government sources, organizational or corporate sources, as well as personal or individual sources. All right, so in terms of contextual sources, because these sources are often written by what the Academy considers as non-experts, they should be treated as popular sources at best. So here we have some other examples. I don't think I'd call them necessarily bad sources, just not the best sources to use. These sources are probably good for getting a general overview in terms of information, but they're not very reliable. So sources to never include in an academic paper unless the academic paper is on the source itself. These include Wikipedia, about.com, unofficial blogs, and opinion pieces, unless of course you explain why it's included and make clear what type of source it is. All right, so where do you find sources? What are some of the best places and what are some of the okay places? So the first one that I would go to, honestly, is Google Scholar. I would type in some search terms there and just see what pops up. You're going to get, for the most part, articles and books that you can access there. For the most part, sometimes you can't access stuff. The next thing I would do is, of course, if you're in town, you can go to the OSU library, but you can access that online. For this course especially, and most courses in art education, it's really nice because we have a guide for this course, so you can go to this link and check out that guide to also help you narrow down your search when looking for resources. The next thing, if you're wanting to look at a specific journal, you can go through the OSU library and search for a journal and that database. Same thing with the news article, or you can just simply, search in the regular search box on the OSU library and see what pops up. And then other places that you're going to use, which are okay. Sometimes they're going to have, references to academic sources for sure. I'm thinking of news websites here, but just general websites, of course, that you can connect to, and then Google Books, which will also pop up under Google Scholar sometimes as well. So for this course, we do use APA format, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what this looks like. All right, so ways to use sources. First of all, we can paraphrase from a source, right? We can take a quote and we can turn it into our own words and reference that author, or we can take a direct quote from the resource and also reference that author. In terms of help for using and citing sources, you can refer to 3 areas. I have on Carmen a very helpful APA cheat sheet. You can also go to the OSU library website, and if you'll notice beside the source, usually on the right hand, it will say cite source, and if you press that and drop it down, you can just click APA 7 and it will cite it for you. Another thing that you can do is go to Purdue OWL. They also have really great outlines for referencing and citing, but also outlining papers and structuring papers. You can use that for other classes too that do not follow APA. And then another one that I will add here is Scriber. This is a great website also. It's like a citation machine. You can input the information and it will like pop out the correct citation for you. So in terms of paraphrasing, which I mentioned before, this means that you're going to summarize in your own words a short but complex statement or idea. You're going to indicate a paraphrase by noting the publication, right? You want to cite them, you want to reference them for their work. So you're going to include the author's last name and the year of publication. Here's just a good example of someone paraphrasing from Rachel Ray 2010. You'll notice the 2 different ways in which this person was able to paraphrase. So you can have the author's name outside of those brackets, or you can keep them within if you're not directly referencing the author. So here are some additional useful tips. So if there's no author that is listed for a source, you're just going to use the source's title, and then you're going to include the year after that. If you need to cite more than one source for a sentence, you can put the citations in the middle of the sentence and put them right after where you're making that reference to that specific resource. And then if your source has 2 authors, you can just use that and symbol and put that in between the authors' names. So when you have a direct quote, something that's in brackets, right, you've taken that, copied and pasted it into your work, you're going to cite using the author's name, the year of the publication, and of course the page number so that I can double check and see exactly where you found that quote. Okay, so you're going to quote information from resources when you cannot paraphrase in a more concise or useful manner, when you realize that altering the statement will do it injustice, and very similarly, when presenting the exact phrasing of the original is necessary and probably most necessary for how it is you're going to support whatever argument you're making. How to quote. So quotes or verses that extend 4 or more page lines should be considered block quotes. This means that the quote is going to be indented and presented without quotation marks. For these quotes, you're not going to change any of the words from the original quoted text. If you need to add words, however, you're going to place them in brackets. And of course, you're going to think about, how adding these words helps to clarify what the author is saying. And then lastly, deleted words should be noted with the ellipses. Here are some additional tips for how to quote. So if a question mark is present in the direct quote, you're going to include it in the quotation citation. Otherwise, if a question mark is not present in the direct quote, do not include it in the quotation citation. Basic rules for a reference page. So you're going to start the reference page on a separate page at the very end of your paper. You're going to use 1-inch margins all around, title to page reference at the very center, and then you're going to indent second and subsequent lines of a complete citation, and I will show you an example of this on the next slide. So I hope that illustration was helpful for you, but if you need to look more closely at some examples, you can check out the APA publication manual. You should be able to access that through the OSU library. And then you can also look at, again, Purdue OWL and check that reference out as well. So here are just some additional tips. Do not capitalize articles, so like and the, and prepositions in and with in a title unless they begin or at the start of the title. In text, the names of composition works should be italicized. So for example, the film Dumb and Dumber should appear as such. Another tip, remember to use an APA title page, not the heading for every essay. You can check Purdue OWL or the examples that are of essays that are on Carmen already. Every part of an APA paper is also double spaced. Again, it has that 1-inch margins all around, and it avoids extra large periods.